Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. OMG doesn't even begin to cover the seismic shockwave that rips through Genoa City the moment Matt steps out of the shadows and drops the kind of bombshell that rewrites family histories, shatters loyalties, and exposes the terrifying fragility of truth in a town built on secrets. Because in one breathless, unforgiving declaration he looks Adam Newman straight in the eye and snarls the words no one was prepared to hear. Connor isn't your son. Connor is my son. And from that instant forward, the young and the restless pivots into a harrowing, emotionally charged spiral where every glance is suspect, every memory is re-examined, and every relationship teeters on the brink of collapse as Adam's world implodes in slow motion. His carefully reconstructed identity as a father cracking under the weight of a revelation that weaponizes biology against love, while Connor, innocent, vulnerable, and unknowingly standing at the center of a generational earthquake, becomes the silent fulcrum upon which power, guilt, and obsession turn, forcing Adam to relive every moment he ever held his son, every promise whispered in the dark, every sacrifice he believed defined him, now haunted by the possibility that those memories were built on a lie engineered by Matt with surgical precision, because Matt doesn't just claim paternity, he unspools a calculated narrative of stolen time, manipulated tests, altered records, and buried consent, painting himself not as an interloper but as a father robbed, a man who watched from afar as another man raised his child, and he delivers the story with chilling calm, as if savoring each heartbeat of Adam's disbelief, knowing full well that the power of the reveal isn't just in the words but in the timing. Right when Adam had finally stabilized Connor's life, right when Chelsea believed the storm had passed, right when Victor Newman thought the family's worst scandals were finally contained. Yet Victor, ever the general, instantly recognizes the strategic genius of the strike, because Matt isn't just attacking Adam's heart, he's attacking the Newman legacy itself, undermining the bloodline with a single sentence that echoes through the ranch like a gunshot, prompting Victor to mobilize lawyers, private investigators, and old favors before the reverberations can cost them everything. But even Victor's ironclad confidence falters when Matt produces documents that look disturbingly real, when whispers surface of a clinic employee paid off years ago, when dates align too neatly to dismiss, and suddenly the question isn't whether Matt is lying but how deep the lie, or the truth, really goes. While Chelsea is pulled apart by competing instincts to protect Connor at all costs and to confront the possibility that she may have been manipulated, gaslit, or coerced during one of the most vulnerable periods of her life, forcing her to revisit choices she thought were hers alone. And as the past collides violently with the present, flashbacks bleed into confrontations, memories refract under pressure, and Chelsea's pain becomes the emotional accelerant that threatens to ignite everyone around her. Because if Matt's claim holds even a kernel of truth, then Connor's stability, his sense of self, and his fragile mental health are at risk of being weaponized in a ruthless adult war, a reality that terrifies Adam more than any loss of power or reputation ever could, driving him to lash out, to deny, to investigate obsessively, to oscillate between rage and desperation as he clings to the one truth that has defined his redemption, being Connor's father, only to find that love may not be enough to shield him from biology's brutal intrusion. And yet Matt's motives remain maddeningly opaque, because while he frames his confession as an act of honesty long delayed, his eyes betray calculation, his alliances suggest leverage, and his timing screams revenge, hinting that this revelation may be less about reclaiming a son and more about detonating Adam's hard-won peace, destabilizing the Newmans, and forcing Victor into a corner where every move carries catastrophic collateral damage, especially as whispers spread that Matt has been quietly positioning himself for months, cultivating allies who resent Newman dominance, collecting secrets like currency, and preparing this reveal as the ultimate bargaining chip, one that could grant him access, money, or immunity depending on how far he's willing to push. And as Genoa City's rumor mill explodes, friends take sides, enemies smell blood, and the once private question of Connor's paternity becomes a public spectacle, raising ethical nightmares about consent, confidentiality, and the morality of truth when truth itself can harm a child, while Adam spirals into a familiar darkness, battling the urge to self-destruct as he hunts for proof that will either vindicate him or confirm his worst fear. And in the process he alienates allies who fear his obsession will hurt Connor, prompting emotionally raw confrontations where Adam insists that fatherhood is more than DNA, that he has earned his place through sleepless nights, hospital visits, and unconditional love, only to be met with the devastating counterargument that the law, and perhaps biology, may not agree, a clash that forces the entire canvas to grapple with what truly makes a parent, as Victor schemes behind closed doors to neutralize Matt through legal chokeholds or reputational annihilation. Nikki worries about the generational trauma threatening to swallow Connor whole, and Jack Abbott watches from the sidelines with wary empathy, recognizing the familiar pattern of Newman hubris meeting its match in an enemy who understands that the most effective way to wound a titan is through his children, while Chelsea, caught between two men claiming the same child, becomes the emotional center of the storm, demanding boundaries, insisting that Connor's well-being supersede every vendetta, and threatening to burn down anyone who treats her son like a chess piece, a warning that lands hard but may come too late as subpoenas loom, DNA tests are ordered, and the specter of a courtroom showdown hangs heavy in the air, promising scenes where scientific certainty collides with emotional truth, where a lab result could erase years of lived reality in a single line of text, and as the clock ticks toward answers, Matt escalates, hinting that he knows more than he's said, that Connor's conception wasn't the only secret buried, that others conspired or looked the other way, sending shockwaves of paranoia through the Newman inner circle as each member wonders what skeletons might be dragged into the light next. And through it all, Connor remains the silent heart of the story, his vulnerability a constant reminder of what's at stake, his future balanced precariously between men driven by pride, regret, and unresolved pain, ensuring that when the truth finally emerges, whether it confirms Matt's claim, exposes an elaborate lie, or reveals a far more complicated reality, it will not simply resolve a mystery but permanently alter the emotional architecture of the show, redefining Adam's journey, challenging Victor's control, testing Chelsea's strength, and asking the audience to confront the uncomfortable question at the core of this bombshell. When love, time, and sacrifice collide with DNA, which one truly makes a father? And who has the right to claim a child when the cost of the answer could scar him forever? Making this revelation not just a twist but a reckoning that reverberates long after the words "Connor is my son" stop echoing through Genoa City. As the reverberations of Matt's explosive declaration continue to tear through Genoa City, the aftermath becomes less about the shock of the words themselves and more about the irreversible chain reaction they ignite, because once a truth of that magnitude is spoken aloud, whether real or manufactured, it takes on a life of its own, infecting every corner of the canvas with suspicion, fear, and moral ambiguity. And in the days that follow, Adam Newman finds himself trapped in a waking nightmare, where sleep offers no escape and every quiet moment is haunted by the same relentless question: what if it's true? A question that gnaws at him not just as a man but as a father who has rebuilt his entire sense of worth around protecting Connor, guiding him, and proving that he could break the cycle of abandonment and cruelty that defined his own childhood. And now that fragile redemption feels like it's being ripped from his hands by a man who understands exactly where to strike to cause maximum devastation, because Matt doesn't push forward with raw aggression but with a cold, methodical patience that is somehow even more unsettling, allowing Adam to unravel on his own while he calmly prepares his next move, filing motions, requesting court-ordered DNA tests, and leaking just enough information to the right people to ensure that the story spreads like wildfire before anyone can contain it, turning Connor's paternity into the most whispered about scandal in town, one that seeps into boardrooms, living rooms, and hospital corridors alike, while Adam's relationships begin to fracture under the strain, starting with Chelsea, whose trust in Adam is tested not by his love for Connor but by his increasingly volatile behavior as he obsesses over proving Matt wrong, snapping at allies, ignoring medical advice about Connor's stress levels, and insisting that knowing the truth is the only way to protect his son, even as Chelsea argues, through tears and exhaustion, that sometimes the pursuit of truth can be just as damaging as a lie, especially when a child is already struggling to feel safe in the world, a plea that momentarily breaks through Adam's defenses before his fear hardens again, because deep down he knows that if Matt is telling the truth, then the law may one day force Connor away from him, and that terror eclipses every other concern, pushing Adam into a corner where desperation begins to dictate his choices, including considering ethically murky tactics of his own, such as digging into Matt's past with the same ruthless intensity Victor once used against his enemies, blurring the line between justice and vengeance in a way that alarms even those who have stood by Adam through his darkest moments. While Victor Newman watches this unfold with a mix of fury and grim recognition, seeing echoes of his own mistakes in Adam's spiral, yet unable to simply intervene without risking further exposure, because Matt's claim doesn't just threaten Adam, it threatens the Newman name itself, calling into question the integrity of medical institutions they've trusted, the reach of their influence, and the illusion that money and power can control every outcome, forcing Victor to confront a rare vulnerability, the possibility that no amount of force can undo what has already been set in motion, especially if Matt's evidence withstands scrutiny, a fear that drives Victor to quietly assemble a legal war room, pulling in experts who specialize in contested paternity, medical fraud, and sealed records, all while instructing them to move discreetly, knowing that any overt show of power could backfire spectacularly in the court of public opinion. Yet even as Victor strategizes, he cannot fully silence the gnawing doubt planted by Matt's confidence, because men who bluff rarely do so with that level of composure, and the more Victor examines the timeline, the more he realizes how disturbingly plausible the claim could be, a realization that shakes him in ways he would never admit, particularly when he considers Connor's fragile mental health, and the devastating impact such upheaval could have on a child already battling anxiety and identity issues, making this not just a legal crisis but a moral one that tests Victor's long-held belief that the ends always justify the means, while Nikki, acting as the family's emotional conscience, urges restraint and compassion, reminding Victor and Adam alike that Connor is not a prize to be won or lost but a human being whose sense of safety must come first, a sentiment that resonates with many but clashes violently with Matt's escalating campaign, because Matt does not retreat into the shadows after making his claim. Instead, he leans into it, granting carefully worded interviews through his attorney, positioning himself as a wronged father seeking justice rather than a villain out for revenge, and this reframing complicates the narrative in dangerous ways, drawing sympathy from outsiders who see the Newmans as untouchable elites finally being held accountable, a shift in public perception that further isolates Adam and makes every aggressive move look like bullying, regardless of intent, while Jack Abbott, ever the observer, offers Adam cautious counsel rooted in hard-earned experience, warning him that obsession can cost him everything if he's not careful, advice Adam hears but struggles to accept as the pressure mounts, because every delay in resolving the truth feels like a ticking clock counting down to a moment when Connor will inevitably ask the question that terrifies everyone. Why is this happening to me? And that moment looms closer as Connor begins to sense the tension around him, picking up on hushed conversations and strained smiles, his intuition sharpening in ways that break Chelsea's heart, prompting her to demand a temporary ceasefire, insisting that legal proceedings be slowed until Connor can be stabilized, a request that Matt appears to consider before rejecting it under the guise of urgency, claiming that a child has a right to know his biological father, a statement that ignites fierce debate among the characters about rights versus responsibilities, biology versus bonding, and whether truth is always a gift or sometimes a burden too heavy for a child to carry. Debates that play out in emotionally charged confrontations where no one emerges unscathed, especially Adam, whose conviction that fatherhood is defined by presence, sacrifice, and love is repeatedly challenged by a system that privileges DNA above all else, leaving him to grapple with the haunting possibility that everything he's built could be taken away despite his devotion, a fear that drives him to a breaking point where he confronts Matt directly in a raw, explosive showdown that strips away legal posturing and exposes the raw emotions beneath, as Adam accuses Matt of using Connor as a weapon, of caring more about revenge than reconciliation, only for Matt to fire back with his own grievances, recounting years of silence, exclusion, and the pain of watching another man raise his child, a confession that momentarily humanizes him and complicates the audience's perception, because in that moment it becomes clear that Matt is not motivated by a single emotion but by a volatile mix of regret, resentment, and a twisted sense of entitlement, making him both antagonist and tragic figure, and as the confrontation ends without resolution, the inevitability of a DNA test hangs heavy, a scientific verdict poised to either validate or destroy lives, while Chelsea braces herself for either outcome, preparing contingency plans to shield Connor from the fallout, even as she quietly wrestles with guilt over past decisions she barely remembers clearly, haunted by the possibility that she may have unknowingly participated in a deception that altered multiple destinies, and when the day finally arrives for the test results to be revealed, the atmosphere is suffocating with anticipation, every character holding their breath as if the air itself might shatter under the weight of the truth, and regardless of what the results ultimately show, whether they confirm Adam's worst fears, expose Matt's claim as an elaborate lie, or reveal a more complex biological reality involving manipulation beyond either man's knowledge, the impact is immediate and irreversible, because by the time the truth is spoken, too much damage has already been done for anyone to simply return to the way things were. Relationships are forever altered, trust is fractured, and Connor's world has been irrevocably shaken, forcing everyone involved to confront the consequences of secrets kept, truths revealed, and the dangerous power of claiming ownership over another human being, ensuring that this bombshell does not resolve neatly but instead reverberates far into the future, reshaping alliances, redefining fatherhood, and cementing this storyline as one of the most emotionally complex and morally challenging arcs The Young and the Restless has explored, leaving viewers to wrestle with the same question tormenting the characters long after the screen fades to black. When the truth finally comes out, who does it truly serve and who does it ultimately hurt the most? In the quiet aftermath of the DNA revelations, when the shouting subsides and the lawyers retreat behind closed doors, Genoa City is left with something far more unsettling than uncertainty. Consequences that cannot be undone, because regardless of what the test ultimately confirms or denies, the emotional truth has already carved permanent fractures into every relationship it touched, and Adam feels that damage most acutely as he stands at the crossroads between rage and acceptance, forced to confront the painful reality that being Connor's father has never been about winning a legal argument but about showing up when it mattered most, a truth that both steadies and devastates him as he watches Connor sleep, realizing that no court ruling can erase the bond they share, yet also knowing that love alone may not protect that bond from intrusion, a fear that compels Adam to make a rare, selfless choice by agreeing to therapy and mediation, acknowledging for the first time that his desperation to control the outcome may have been harming the very child he's trying to save. A moment of growth that signals a turning point in his arc even as it leaves him emotionally raw and vulnerable, while Chelsea, exhausted but resolute, becomes the anchor Connor desperately needs, asserting boundaries with both men and making it clear that any future arrangement, biological, legal, or emotional, will revolve around Connor's stability rather than adult pride, a stance that earns reluctant respect from Victor and quiet admiration from those who have watched her fight through heartbreak after heartbreak, and Victor himself is forced into an uncharacteristic reckoning as he recognizes that his usual tactics of intimidation and manipulation cannot fix what has already been broken, prompting him to take a step back and allow Adam to define his own path forward, a subtle yet profound shift in their dynamic that hints at healing, even as it underscores years of unresolved damage, while Matt, stripped of the thrill of the reveal and confronted with the real human cost of his actions, begins to show cracks in his composure, grappling with the realization that claiming a child is not the same as earning a place in that child's life, a lesson that arrives too late to undo the pain but early enough to complicate his role moving forward, because whether he remains a looming threat or evolves into a reluctant participant in Connor's world, his presence ensures that the shadow of this bombshell will linger, influencing every choice and interaction, and as Genoa City settles into a fragile new normal, the story shifts from shock to survival, exploring how families rebuild after the truth detonates, how children process identities shaped by forces beyond their control, and how love endures or fractures under the weight of reality, leaving viewers with a haunting reminder that in The Young and the Restless, the most devastating twists are not the ones that end relationships, but the ones that force characters to keep living with the truth long after the secret is exposed. After the dust settles and the initial shock fades, the emotional fallout continues to ripple quietly but relentlessly through Genoa City, because revelations like this don't end when the truth is spoken, they linger, reshaping how every character sees themselves and one another, and Adam, still reeling, begins to understand that his greatest battle is no longer against Matt or the courts but against his own fear of losing Connor. A fear that threatens to consume him if he lets it, pushing him toward a quieter, more introspective resolve where he focuses on being present rather than powerful, choosing patience over control even when it feels unbearable, while Chelsea, determined to protect Connor's fragile sense of safety, works tirelessly to restore normalcy, knowing that consistency may be the only antidote to chaos, and Victor, watching his family walk a path he cannot fully command, is forced to confront the limits of his influence in a way that unsettles him deeply, reminding him that even empires have vulnerabilities, and as Matt faces the consequences of igniting a truth that cannot be reburied, the town is left with an uneasy awareness that some secrets, once revealed, don't just change lives, they redefine them, ensuring that the legacy of this bombshell will echo long after the headlines fade and the whispers quiet, altering the future of Connor, Adam, and the Newman family forever.